Good night, everyone. Please enjoy this relaxed music I've created. Rest your mind in peace as I narrate a topic on why modern humans may have a weaker mentality compared to our ancestors. Let's dive into the topic while you drift along with this dreamy speech. Imagine you are standing in a room that is very quiet and very soft. You are looking at a modern child's bedroom. The floor is covered with a plush carpet. There are shelves filled with colorful plastic toys, books with smooth pages, and a bed with pillows that feel like clouds. On the nightstand, a small tablet glows with a soft light, waiting for a finger to swipe its glass surface. The air is warm and perfectly still. This child is safe, clean, and surrounded by things designed to keep them entertained. But now, take a deep breath and close your eyes. Imagine the walls of the room fading away. The carpet turns into cold, damp earth. The ceiling becomes the vast purple sky of the Ice Age, filled with a million bright stars. The soft hum of the heater is replaced by the low, steady roar of a winter wind and the rhythmic snapping of a wood fire. You are no longer in a bedroom. You are in the world of the primal child. This is the first part of our journey into the secret history of growing up. It is a story about the massive gap between the screen child and the stone child. It is a story about how our rules, our play, and our very definition of what it means to be a kid have been flipped upside down over the last 30,000 years. We are going to look at the playground of the wild to find out why the children of the past were the most capable and independent humans to ever walk the earth, and what happens to a child's mind when the windy cliff is replaced by a padded room. To understand the life of an ancient child, we have to look at the first thing every child does: play. In our world, play is something we think of as separate from real life. We have playgrounds with rubber floors so no one gets a scraped knee. We have toys that do the thinking for the child, dolls that talk, cars that move on their own, and games that give instant rewards. But for a child 30,000 years ago, there was no such thing as a toy in the way we understand it. Their play was their practice for staying alive. Everything they touched was a lesson in physics, biology, and patience. When an ancient child picked up a stick, they weren't just imagining a sword. They were feeling the weight of the wood, learning which branches were strong enough to hold a weight and which ones would snap. They were learning the mechanical truth of the forest. Their playground was the entire world, and it didn't have any safety railings. Imagine a group of 7-year-olds in the Ice Age. They aren't sitting at desks. They are outside in the snow, competing to see who can stay the quietest for the longest time. This isn't just a game. They know that in a few years, their ability to be silent will determine if the tribe eats or starves. They are playing hide and seek in a landscape where the seeker might be a real predator. This high-stakes play created a level of focus that most modern adults would find impossible to achieve. Their senses were high definition. By the age of 6, a primal child could look at a field of grass and see the tiny bend in a leaf that told them a rabbit had passed by. They could hear the difference between a bird singing for joy and a bird giving a warning cry about a hidden cat. Their brain library was filled with the data of the real world, not the data of a screen. They weren't learning about nature. They were nature. The social rules for an ancient child were also completely different. Today, we live in age bubbles. A 5-year-old spends all day with other 5-year-olds. A 10-year-old is with other 10-year-olds. They are separated from the real world of adults until they are nearly 20. But in the ancient tribe, there were no bubbles. A child lived in a multi-generational circle. From the moment they could walk, they were part of the group's daily work. They sat by the elders and watched how a needle was carved from bone. They stood by the hunters and watched how a hide was cleaned. This meant that the ancient child never felt useless. They didn't have to wait until they were grown up to have a purpose. They were the small helpers. They were responsible for gathering dry wood, finding clear water, and watching the younger babies. This sense of responsibility gave them a primal confidence. They knew their place in the world, and they knew that the tribe needed them. They were apprentices to life, learning the skills of a master before they even lost their baby teeth. This leads us to the mystery of risk. In our modern world, we are terrified of letting children take risks. We want them to be safe every second of the day. But for the ancient child, risk was their best teacher. They climbed tall trees because that was where the best fruit grew. They handled sharp stone knives because they needed to learn how to cut their own food. They walked near the edge of the river because they needed to understand the power of the water. Doctors and psychologists today are finding that when we remove all risk from a child's life, we accidentally make them more anxious because they never face small dangers. They never learn how to manage their fear. They never get the victory of the scraped knee. The ancient child, however, was fear-hardened. They had fallen, they had been cold, and they had been hungry. They knew that they could survive a hard moment. This created a mindset of resilience that stayed with them for the rest of their lives. They were tough because their playground was tough, and they were proud of that toughness. We also have to look at the language of silence. A modern child is surrounded by noise, music, television, and the constant chatter of digital devices. Their brains are always being poked by information from the outside. But the ancient child grew up in a world of active silence. They spent hours every day in the quiet of the woods or the cave. In this silence, their internal voice grew strong. They learned how to talk to themselves and how to solve problems in their own heads. They didn't need a screen to tell them what to think or how to feel. They were self-sufficient thinkers. This silence also made them better listeners. When an elder told a story by the fire at night, the child didn't just hear the words, they lived the story. Their imagination was a powerful tool that they had to build themselves, using only the shadows on the wall and the sounds of the night. This deep imagination is something we are losing in a world of pre-made images. The physical condition of the ancient child would look like a superhero to us today. Because they moved constantly, their bones were denser and their muscles were more coordinated. They didn't have gym class. Their life was the gym. They didn't have health food. They ate what the earth provided: wild berries, lean meat, and fresh roots. But it wasn't just about strength. It was about sensory intelligence. Primal Child walked barefoot or in thin leather wraps. They felt every rock, every twig, and every change in the temperature of the ground. This foot-to-brain connection made them incredibly agile. They could run across a rocky field in the dark without tripping because their feet could see the ground. We have insulated our children with thick rubber soles and flat floors, which has made their body logic shrink. We have traded their natural grace for safety, and the price is a loss of connection to their own physical power. One of the most beautiful parts of the ancient child's life was the bond of the pack. Today, many children spend a lot of time alone in their rooms, but the primal child was never alone. They slept in a huddle of brothers, sisters, and cousins. They worked in a group. They ate from the same pot. This created a social armor that protected them from loneliness. They learned how to share, how to negotiate, and how to protect each other without being told. Their peer group was a source of strength, not a source of status anxiety or social media pressure. They didn't care about likes. They cared about trust. They knew that if they were in trouble, 10 other pairs of hands would reach out to help them. This deep belonging is something many modern children are starving for, even when they have 1,000 digital friends. As we look at the gap between the two worlds, we have to ask, are we making our children weaker by making them safer? The answer is complex. Of course, we want our children to be safe from disease and hunger. But we have also removed the internal fire that comes from facing a challenge. We have replaced the adventure of the unknown with the certainty of the screen. We have turned explorers into consumers. The primal gap shows us that children are capable of so much more than we give them credit for. They were born with the brain of a scientist, the heart of a warrior, and the hands of a maker. They were built to survive the Ice Age, yet we treat them as if they can't survive a walk to the park without a phone. The journey of the primal childhood teaches us that the hard way is often the best way for a developing mind. It shows us that a child needs resistance to grow strong roots, just like the tree on the windy cliff. It shows us that play should be a simulated struggle, not just a passive escape. We don't have to throw away our soft pillows and warm heaters, but we can learn to bring a little bit of the wild playground back into our lives. We can let our children get a little bit dirty, a little bit cold, and a little bit bored. We can give them a stick and a rock instead of a screen and a button. We can remind them that they are part of a very old and very brave family of survivors. As you drift off to sleep tonight, try to imagine that ancient child sleeping by the fire. Feel the weight of the furs and the solidness of the earth beneath them. They aren't afraid of the dark because the dark is their home. They aren't worried about tomorrow because they know they have the skills to meet it. They are deeply connected to everything around them. That same primal spark is inside the children of today, waiting for a chance to wake up. It is the part of the brain that loves to climb, the part of the heart that loves to explore, and the part of the soul that needs to belong to a tribe. We have moved from the cave to the bedroom, but the nature of the child hasn't changed. They are still the sharpest learners in the universe, and the world is still their playground, if only we are brave enough to let them see it. The morning is coming, and with it, a new chance to be wild and sharp. The journey of the primal mind continues as we explore the first classroom and the rite of passage. We will find out how the ancient children became adults in a single day, and why our modern extended childhood might be a trap for our intelligence. But for now, let the silence of the night wrap around you. Listen to the internal wind of your own memories. You are a descendant of those tough, capable children. You carry their resilience in your DNA. You are a survivor, born from a long line of explorers who weren't afraid of a little bit of snow or a lot of silence. Take a deep breath and feel the strength in your own lungs. That strength was earned over 30,000 years of wild play and social trust. It is yours to keep, and it is yours to pass on. The primal childhood is not a lost history. It is a manual for the future. It is a reminder that the best way to prepare for the new world is to remember the old rules. Stay curious, stay active, and most of all, stay connected to the earth. The playground of the wild is still there, just beyond the walls of your room, waiting for you to step out and play. Imagine you are a 10-year-old child living 30,000 years ago. The sun is just starting to peek over the edge of the mountains, and the air is crisp and cold. You aren't getting ready to put on a backpack or wait for a yellow bus. You don't have a desk, you don't have a notebook, and you don't have a teacher standing at the front of a room with a chalkboard. But make no mistake, you are a student. In fact, you are a student in the most difficult and high-stakes school that has ever existed. Your classroom is the entire forest. Your lessons are hidden in the tracks of the mud, the smell of the wind, and the sharp edges of a broken stone. If you fail a test here, don't just get a bad grade. Your family might go hungry, or you might not know which plant is a medicine and which one is a poison. This is the second part of our journey into the primal childhood. It is the story of the first classroom. It is a story about how humans learned to be masters of the world without ever opening a book. We are going to look at how ancient children learned complex physics, biology, and math through the power of watching and doing, and find out why their hand-mind education was so much more powerful than the way we learn today. To understand how the first classroom worked, we have to look at the master-apprentice relationship. In our modern world, we think that learning is something that happens while you are sitting still and listening to someone talk. We think that information flows from a teacher's mouth into a student's ear. But for the ancient child, learning was a full-body experience. It started with the quiet watch. Imagine a young boy sitting near his father, who is working on a spear. The father doesn't explain the science of friction or the geometry of the flint point. He just works. The boy sits perfectly still, sometimes for hours, just watching. He watches how his father's thumb presses against the stone. He listens for the specific click that means the stone is about to flake. He smells the sharp, metallic scent of the flint as it breaks. This is deep observation. The child's brain is like a sponge, soaking up thousands of tiny details that can't be put into words. This is the foundation of primal intelligence. This leads us to the science of the hand. In our modern schools, we treat subjects like physics and biology as things you study on a screen or a page. But for the primal child, physics was something you felt in your muscles. When a girl helped her mother build a winter shelter, she was learning about structural engineering. She had to understand which branches were strong enough to hold the weight of the snow. She had to understand how to weave the reeds so the wind couldn't get through. She was learning about thermal insulation by feeling the difference between a single layer of skin and a double layer of skin. She didn't need a formula to know how heat works. She knew it because she was the one building the wall that kept her baby brother warm. Her understanding of the world was mechanical and grounded. She knew the truth of materials because she had touched every single one of them. Biology was the most important subject in the first classroom. But again, it wasn't about looking at diagrams of cells. It was practical botany and zoology. A primal child by the age of 8 could identify hundreds of different plants. They knew which roots were full of energy and which berries would make their stomach cramp. They learned this through sensory memory. They would walk with the elders through the meadows, touching the leaves, smelling the crushed stems, and tasting tiny bits under supervision. They were building a living encyclopedia in their heads. They knew the life cycle of every animal in the valley. They knew that when the birch trees turned yellow, the reindeer would start moving toward the south. They knew that a certain type of bird singing meant there was water nearby. This wasn't hobbies or outdoor fun. It was high-level scientific data that they used every single day to survive. The first classroom also taught primal mathematics. We often think that ancient people couldn't count or do math because they didn't have numbers written down. But their spatial math was incredible. Think about a hunter-gatherer child helping to share a large catch of meat. They had to understand division and fractions to make sure every family in the tribe got a fair share based on their size and need. They used geometry to calculate the flight of a spear through the air, accounting for the speed of the wind and the curve of the throw. They used set theory to track the size of animal herds, noticing if a group was getting smaller or larger over time. They didn't use symbols on a page. They used visual estimation and logical patterns. Their math was alive, and it was always connected to a real problem that needed to be solved right now. One of the most beautiful parts of the first classroom was the power of the songline. Since there was no writing, the ancestors had to find a way to store all their knowledge so it wouldn't be lost. They turned their curriculum into music and stories. Every important lesson, how to find the hidden spring, how to treat a snake bite, or the history of the Great Flood, was put into a rhythmic song or a dramatic legend. The children would hear these stories every night by the fire. This was audio learning at its best. Because the lessons were in rhymes and melodies, they were almost impossible to forget. A child could sing the map of the mountain even if they had never been there, because the song told them exactly where to turn and what the rocks would look like. This musical memory allowed humans to carry a library of information that was thousands of years old inside their own hearts. In the first classroom, there was no such thing as homework, because your entire life was the work. But there was a very clear progression of mastery. A child didn't start by hunting a mammoth. They started by gathering. They learned the patience of the small tasks. They spent their days finding firewood, collecting bird eggs, and digging for tubers. These tasks were skill builders. Gathering firewood taught them how to judge the dryness of wood and how to navigate the forest alone. Collecting eggs taught them how to be gentle and how to read the behavior of birds. Each small job was a prerequisite for the bigger jobs later. The elders were always watching, not to give them a grade, but to see if the child was ready for the next level of responsibility. Graduation happened when a child could complete a task from start to finish without any help. One of the major differences between the ancient classroom and the modern school is the consistency of the truth. In a modern school, you might learn something in a book that has nothing to do with your real life. You might study a country you will never visit or a math problem you will never use. This creates a mental disconnect. But in the ancient world, every lesson was instantly verifiable. If an elder told you that a certain cloud shape meant a storm was coming, you saw the storm arrive 2 hours later. This built a deep trust in information. It made the children incredibly attentive. They didn't drift off or get bored because they could see the direct connection between the lesson and their own comfort. Their internal motivation was perfect because the rewards were real. A warm fire, a full belly, and the respect of their pack. The first classroom was also highly social. Today, we make children work alone at their desks. We tell them that talking is cheating. But in the ancient world, collaboration was the only way to learn. Children worked in peer groups of different ages. A 10-year-old would teach a 5-year-old how to tie a knot, and in doing so, the 10-year-old would master the skill even more deeply. This is what we now call the protege effect. The idea that the best way to learn something is to teach it to someone else. The ancient classroom was a constant conversation. There was a continuous flow of questions and answers, jokes and warnings. This social learning built emotional intelligence alongside technical skill. They were learning how to be a team member. At the same time, they were learning how to be a tool maker. We also have to look at the role of failure. In a modern school, failure is something to be ashamed of. It is a red mark on a paper. But in the first classroom, failure was just feedback. If you tried to start a fire and the wood didn't catch, the fire didn't judge you. It just stayed cold. This objective feedback taught children to be resilient and analytical. They didn't cry when they failed. They looked at the wood, looked at the drill, and asked, "What did I do wrong?" They were natural scientists, always experimenting and adjusting. They learned that the world is a fair teacher. If you follow the rules of nature, you get the result. If you don't, you don't. This lack of social judgment allowed them to learn much faster because they weren't afraid of making a mistake. As we compare the ancient child's education to our own, we see a massive loss of context. We have taken learning out of the world and put it into a box. We have separated thinking from doing. This has created a generation of people who know a lot of facts but have very little wisdom. We have people who can pass a test about the environment but don't know how to grow a tomato. We have people who understand the theory of physics but don't know how to use a hammer. The primal gap in education is the loss of the integrated mind. The ancient child didn't have subjects. They had life. Their brain was a single, powerful engine where everything was connected. The journey of the first classroom teaches us that the best education is one that involves the whole body and all the senses. It shows us that children are built to learn through observation, teaching others, and real-world stakes. We don't have to burn down our schools, but we can learn to bring the spirit of the forest back into our homes. We can let our children watch us work. We can give them real responsibilities. Instead of fake chores, we can turn our walks into song lines and our stories into manuals. We can remind them that the world is a mystery that they are meant to solve with their own hands and their own minds. As you drift off to sleep tonight, try to imagine that you are sitting by that ancient fire, listening to the elders. Feel the weight of the information being passed to you through the song. Realize that you are the result of thousands of generations of successful learners. Your brain is not a blank slate. It is a high-tech machine designed for the first classroom. It is wired to watch, to mimic, and to master. That same primal curiosity is still inside you, waiting for a chance to explore. You are a student of the universe, and the lessons never stop. The spirit of the apprentice is your birthright. The morning is coming, and with it, a new lesson. The journey of the primal childhood continues as we explore the rite of passage. We will find out how a child became an adult in a single day and why the testing of the soul was the final exam of the Stone Age. We will see how ancient cultures helped their children find their true names and their true purpose. But for now, let the silence of the night be your teacher. Listen to the steady rhythm of your own breath. You are a descendant of the world's first geniuses, born from a long line of people who knew that the best way to understand a stone was to turn it into a tool. Take a deep breath and feel the quiet confidence in your own mind. That confidence was earned through 30,000 years of real-world mastery and hand-mind connection. It is yours to keep, and it is yours to use. The first classroom is not a memory of the past. It is a blueprint for the future. It is a reminder that we learn best when we are fully present in the world with our eyes open and our hands ready. Stay sharp, stay humble, and most of all, stay grounded in the truth of the earth. The forest is still there, and the lessons are waiting for you to find them. Imagine you are a 13-year-old child living in our modern world. You are in a strange middle zone. You are too big to be a little kid, but you are too young to be an adult. You spend your days in the classroom, your parents still make your meals, and you aren't quite sure when your childhood will actually end. Is it when you turn 18? Is it when you finish college? Is it when you get your first job? For many people today, adulthood is a blurry, foggy destination that stays far away for a long time. But now, take a deep breath and travel back 30,000 years. Imagine you are that same 13-year-old sitting by the fire in a mammoth skin tent. Tonight, the elders of your tribe aren't telling funny stories or singing happy songs. They are looking at you with a new kind of seriousness. Tomorrow morning, when the sun rises, you will no longer be a child. You will be led away from the safety of your mother's side and taken to the edge of the world. By the time you return, the tribe will no longer see you as a small helper. They will see you as a provider, a protector, and a peer. This is the third part of our journey into the primal childhood. It is the story of the rite of passage. It is a story about the day a child becomes a giant. We are going to look at the testing of the soul, the power of the solo, vigil, and find out why the ancient clear boundary between childhood and adulthood created a sense of purpose and mental strength that we are struggling to find in our modern world. To understand why the rite of passage was so important, we have to look at the vague adulthood of today. Modern children often suffer from a lot of anxiety because they don't know who they are. They are told to find themselves, but the world doesn't give them a map. They linger in childhood for 20 or even 25 years. But for the ancient child, the tribe provided the map. They believed that a person's spirit had to be born twice. The first birth was from the mother, which made you a biological human. The second birth was from the tribe, which made you a social human. The rite of passage was the social birth. It was a planned, high-stakes event that forced the child to leave their inner child behind and wake up their inner adult. It was a psychological cut that was necessary for the survival of the group. If the tribe was going to survive the winter, they couldn't have grown men and women acting like children. They needed everyone to be sharp, responsible, and brave. The rite of passage usually started with the separation. Imagine being woken up in the middle of the night while the rest of the camp is asleep. The elders, dressed in their finest furs and painted with white clay, lead you out into the dark forest. You aren't allowed to look back at your home. You are being removed from your comfort zone. This was a form of symbolic death. The tribe was telling you that the person you were yesterday is gone. You are no longer the child who plays with sticks or cries for help. You are entering the void, a place where you are neither a child nor an adult. This separation was terrifying, but it was also exciting. It told the child that they were important enough to be tested. It told them that they were ready for something bigger. It gave them a mission. This leads us to the solo vigil, which was the core of the ancient test. In many cultures, the child was left alone in the wilderness for 3 days and 3 nights. They were given no food and very little water. Their only tools were a small stone knife and their own memory. Think about the mental shift that happens in that situation. When you are a child, you look to others for food and safety. But when you are alone in the dark and you hear the howl of a wolf or the snap of a branch, you have to look to yourself. You have to use the first classroom lessons we talked about in the last chapter. You have to remember how to find a dry spot to sleep. You have to remember which plants are safe to chew. You have to manage your own fear without anyone to hold your hand. This was extreme self-reliance. It forced the brain to switch from passive consumer to active survivor. During these 3 days, the child would often experience what we now call a vision quest. When you are hungry, tired, and alone in nature, your brain enters a different state. You start to see the world with incredible clarity. You notice the patterns in the stars. You feel the rhythm of the wind. You might even have a powerful dream or a realization about your own strength. The elders called this finding your true name. It was the moment the child discovered their own unique spark of genius. They realized that they weren't just a copy of their father or mother. They were an individual with their own skills and their own purpose. This self-discovery wasn't something they read about in a book. It was something they earned through struggle. By the time the third sun rose, the child had a deep confidence that no one could ever take away. They knew they could survive the worst, so they were no longer afraid of the small things. The next part of the rite was the ordeal. This was a physical test designed to prove that the child could handle pain and discomfort for the sake of the tribe. In some cultures, it involved a long, difficult run through the snow. In others, it involved getting a permanent mark, like a tattoo or a scar made with a sharp bone. This wasn't about being mean to the child. It was a sacrifice. By enduring the pain without screaming, the child was proving that their mind was the master of their body. They were showing that they were strong enough to protect a baby or a sick elder, even when they themselves were hurting. This physical grit was the final exam of the Stone Age. It built a toughness of character that lasted a lifetime. It taught the child that good things are worth the hard effort. The return to the tribe was the most beautiful part of the story. Imagine the child walking back toward the camp. They are tired, hungry, and dirty, but their eyes are different. They stand taller. They move with a new kind of gravity. As they enter the circle of the fire, the entire tribe is there to meet them. But they don't treat them like a child anymore. The mothers don't run to hug them and tell them it's okay. Instead, the hunters stand and nod with respect. The elders give them a new name, a name that reflects the strength they showed during their test. They are given their own spear or their own sewing kit. They are invited to sit in the inner circle of the fire where the big decisions are made. This was the public validation. The child didn't have to wonder if they were an adult. The community had told them they were. This certainty of status is something modern teenagers are missing. We give them a driver's license or a diploma, but we don't give them the respect of the peers. The social rules changed instantly for the new adult. As a child, your only job was to learn. But as an adult, your job was to provide. You were now responsible for the lives of others. This weight of duty might sound heavy, but it was actually a gift. Humans are goal-oriented animals. We are happiest when we have a job to do. The ancient adult felt a deep sense of belonging because they knew exactly what their job was. They knew that if they didn't find food, the tribe would be hungry. They knew that if they didn't watch the fire, the tribe would be cold. This necessity acted like a mental anchor. It kept them from drifting into the sadness or the melancholy that we talked about in the primal gap. They didn't have time to be depressed or bored because their life had mission. They were part of a winning team. As we look at the gap between the ancient rite and our modern world, we see a crisis of meaning because we have removed the clear boundary. Many young people today feel stuck. They feel like they are playing at life instead of living for real. They have all the toys of a child, but none of the power of an adult. They have all the safety of the home, but none of the victory of the wilderness. This extended childhood creates a lot of inner turmoil. It's like being a bird that is kept in a cage for too long, even when the door is opened. The bird isn't sure if it can fly. The ancient rite of passage was the door opener. It forced the bird to fly, and in doing so, it proved that the bird was a master of the sky. The journey of the rite of passage teaches us that clarity is a basic human need. It shows us that we need milestones to know where we are in our journey. It shows us that struggle is not an enemy, but a teacher that helps us find our strength. We don't have to leave our 13-year-olds in the woods for 3 days, but we can learn to bring the spirit of the rite back into our lives. We can give our children real responsibilities that actually matter to the family. We can create challenges that require them to face their fears and use their skills. We can stop treating them like fragile objects and start treating them like developing giants. We can remind them that they are part of a very old and very brave family that has survived everything the world could throw at it. As you drift off to sleep tonight, try to imagine that you are that young person returning from the solo vigil. Feel the deep peace that comes from knowing you are strong. Feel the quiet pride that comes from having earned the respect of your tribe. You aren't just a person in a room, you are a member of a pack. You have a name, you have a purpose, and you have a future. That same adult spark is inside you, waiting for a chance to do something meaningful. You carry the grit and the resilience of 30,000 years in your bones. You are a survivor, born from a long line of people who weren't afraid to walk into the dark and find their own light. The morning is coming, and with it, a new responsibility. The journey of the primal childhood continues as we explore the bond of the huddle. We will find out how children learned the social code and the power of the Tao group, and why our modern individualism might be making us more lonely. We will see how ancient kids played team games that were actually military, drills, and moral lessons. But for now, let the silence of the night be your comfort. Listen to the steady beat of your own heart. You are a descendant of the world's most purposeful people, born from a long line of those who knew that the best way to grow up was to face the world with your head held high and your spear ready. Take a deep breath and feel the internal strength in your own spirit. That strength was earned through generations of solo vigils and community respect. It is yours to keep, and it is yours to use. The rite of passage is not a lost history, it is a manual for purpose. It is a reminder that we are at our best when we have a clear goal and a deep responsibility to others. Stay sharp, stay brave, and most of all, stay connected to your own power. The world is still a mystery, and you are the one who is meant to lead the way through it. Imagine you are a child in our modern world, and it is time for bed. You walk down a hallway, enter your own room, and close the door. You climb into your own bed, pull up your own blankets, and turn off your own light. The room is perfectly quiet, and you are all alone. For most of us today, this is what safety and comfort look like. We call it privacy. We think of a private room as a gift we give to our children. But now, take a deep breath and travel back 30,000 years. Imagine you are that same child, but there are no hallways and no private rooms. You are inside a large round tent made of mammoth skins. In the center, a small fire is glowing red. You aren't in your own bed. You are part of a giant human huddle. You are sleeping on a pile of soft furs, and you are pressed tightly between your older brother and your younger cousin. You can hear the steady breathing of 10 different people. You can feel the warmth of your mother's arm and the rhythmic heartbeat of the person next to you. In this world, being alone was the most terrifying thing that could happen. Being part of the huddle was the only way to stay warm and the only way to feel safe. This is the fourth part of our journey into the primal childhood. It is the story of the bond of the huddle. It is a story about how the constant presence of the tribe built a social safety net that protected a child's mind as much as the fire protected their body. We are going to look at the space gap between the modern bedroom and the ancient hearth and find out why our modern individualism might be making our children more anxious, while the ancient collective made them feel invincible. To understand why the huddle was so powerful, we have to look at the biological mirror of the human body. Our brains are designed to look for signals of safety. For millions of years, those signals weren't found in a locked door or an alarm system. They were found in the sound of a human voice, the smell of a familiar person, and the physical touch of the pack. When an ancient child was in the huddle, their brain was constantly receiving safe data. They didn't have to wonder if a predator was near because they knew the elders were awake and watching. They didn't have to worry about being forgotten because they were physically connected to the group. This constant body-to-body contact kept their stress levels very low. In our modern world, we have insulated our children. We have given them their own rooms and their own space, but their ancient brains still wake up in the middle of the night and asked, "Where is the pack? Why am I alone in the dark?" This is why many children today are afraid of the dark or have trouble sleeping. Their Stone Age brain is telling them that being alone is dangerous, even when they are perfectly safe behind a locked door. This leads us to the social armor of the tribe. In the ancient world, a child wasn't just raised by two parents. They were raised by the entire community. There was no such thing as a stranger within the group. Every adult was an aunt or an uncle, and every peer was a brother or a sister. This meant that the ancient child had a deep portfolio of love. If their mother was busy, there were 5 other women ready to hold them. If their father was away hunting, there were 3 grandfathers ready to teach them. This prevented the loneliness trap that many modern children fall into. Today, a child might spend most of their day only interacting with 1 or 2 adults. If those adults are tired or stressed, the child feels it instantly. But in the ancient Huddle, the emotional weight was spread out across 20 people. The child lived in a sea of support. They never felt like they were a burden to just one person, because the responsibility of caring for them was shared by everyone. The rules of the Huddle were learned through constant interaction, not through a list of chores on a refrigerator, because they were always together. Ancient children became masters of body language and social nuance. Long before they could speak, they learned that their actions had an immediate effect on the people around them. If they were selfish with a piece of food, they saw the look of disappointment on their friend's face instantly. If they were kind, they felt the immediate warmth of the group's approval. This created a moral compass that was guided by empathy rather than punishment. They didn't follow the rules because they were afraid of being grounded. They followed the rules because they loved their huddle and wanted to keep the social harmony alive. This natural discipline was much more powerful than any modern system of timeouts, because it was based on the truth of connection. We also have to look at the age bubble of the modern world. Today, children are separated by their birth year. A 6-year-old only plays with 6-year-olds. But in the Primal Huddle, play was multi-age. A group of children might include a 4-year-old, an 8-year-old, and a 12-year-old. This was a natural school of leadership. The older children learned how to be gentle and how to protect the smaller ones. They practiced being teachers and guides. The younger children looked up to the older ones and worked harder to keep up. They learned advanced skills simply by watching the big kids. This diversity made the group much smarter and more flexible. They weren't competing for status within a narrow age group. They were finding their unique role within a broad family. This removed the peer pressure that causes so much sadness in modern schools. In the Huddle, you weren't judged by your coolness. You were valued for your contribution. The physical condition of the Huddle also built sensory trust. In our modern homes, we try to make everything sterile and separate. We have separate plates, separate towels, and separate spaces. But the ancient child grew up in a world of shared sensory experience. They ate from the same pot. They breathed the same smoke, and they felt the same vibrations of the songs. This shared reality created a collective mindset. They didn't think about me, they thought about us. When a storm hit, the child didn't worry about their room or their toys. They worried about the tent and the fire. This shift from ownership to stewardship made them much more resilient. They realized that their individual survival was tied to the survival of the group. This removed the anxiety of self, the feeling that you have to face the world all by yourself. They knew that as long as the huddle was alive, they were alive. One of the most hidden ways the huddle protected the child was through continuous storytelling. In our world, stories are something we consume through a screen, usually alone. But in the ancient huddle, stories were shared experiences that happened every single night. As the fire burned low, the elders would talk. The children would listen while leaning against an adult's shoulder. They would hear the history of their people, the legends of the stars, and the warnings of the forest. This audio heritage acted like a psychological anchor. It gave the children a sense of place in history. They knew where they came from and where they were going. They weren't just kids in a suburb. They were the next link in a chain that was 10,000 years long. This deep identity is something many modern children are missing, leading to the identity crisis we often see in teenagers. The huddle gave the child a mop for the soul before they even knew how to read the landscape. The safety of the open is another strange contrast. We think that walls and locks make us safe, but the ancient child lived in a transparent world. There were no secrets in the huddle. Everyone knew what everyone else was doing. This might sound intrusive to a modern person, but to a child, it was comforting. There was no hidden danger within the group. If a child was sad, everyone knew. If a child was sick, everyone helped. This universal awareness meant that problems were caught and fixed immediately. No one slipped through the cracks in a circle. In our modern world of private rooms and digital screens, a child can be suffering right next to us, and we might not know it for weeks. The huddle was the world's first early warning system for mental and physical health. It was a house of truth. As we look at the gap between the private room and the public hearth, we have to ask, what have we lost in our pursuit of privacy? We have gained comfort and quiet, but we have lost the shield of presence. We have traded the heartbeat of the pack for the silence of the wall. The all primal gap in childhood is the loss of the social safety net that comes from being physically together. We see the result in the rising rates of childhood anxiety, depression, and loneliness. We are the most connected people in history through our phones, but we are the most isolated people in history through our spaces. The ancient child was never connected to a network, but they were never isolated from a heart. The journey of the bond of the huddle teaches us that proximity is a form of medicine. It shows us that humans need to be seen and touched to feel healthy. It shows us that a family is more than just people who live in the same house. It is a shared life that requires shared space. We don't have to tear down our walls, but we can learn to soften them. We can have family nights where the phones are put away and everyone sits on the floor together. we can allow our children to sleep in a huddle with their siblings. If they are afraid, we can move our dinner table to the center of the house and make it the new hearth. We can choose to spend more time in public plazas and community parks, rebuilding the multi-generational pack in our own neighborhoods. We can remind our children that they are part of a wider huddle that includes their neighbors, their friends, and their world. As you drift off to sleep tonight, try to imagine the sound of that ancient huddle. Listen for the rhythmic breathing of your ancestors. Feel the warmth of the mammoth furs and the solidness of the people around you. You aren't just an individual in a bed. You are a member of a species that has survived for millions of years by sticking together. That same need for connection is inside you, and it is inside your children. It is the part of the brain that loves a hug, the part of the heart that loves a shared laugh, and the part of the soul that needs to know it isn't alone. We have moved from the mammoth tent to the modern house, but the heart of the huddle hasn't changed. We are still pack animals, and we are still at our best when we are closer together. The morning is coming, and with it, a new chance to connect and to care. The journey of the primal childhood continues as we explore the final lesson and the deep human child. We will find out how we can take the wisdom of the huddle, the classroom, and the wild playground to build a future where our children are both safe and strong. We will see how the new childhood can be a hybrid of the ancient and the modern. But for now, let the quiet presence of your own breath be your comfort. Listen to the internal rhythm of your own belonging. You are a descendant of the world's most connected people, born from a long line of those who knew that the best way to survive the night was to huddle close and wait for the light. Take a deep breath and feel the quiet strength in your own heart. That strength was earned through 30,000 years of shared heat and group trust. It is yours to keep, and it is yours to share. The bond of the huddle is not a lost history. It is a blueprint for peace. It is a reminder that we are at our best when we look out for each other and when we stay present in the moment. Stay kind, stay close, and most of all, stay connected to your pack. The fire is still burning, and the circle is waiting for you to find your place in it. Imagine you are standing at the edge of a great forest as the sun begins to rise. Behind you is a modern city, filled with the hum of electricity, the glow of screens, and the comfort of soft beds. In front of you is the wild world, filled with the scent of pine, the sound of rushing water, and the mystery of the deep shadows. Now, imagine a child standing at that same edge. This child has a smartphone in their pocket, but they also have a steady hand and a sharp eye. They know how to use a search engine to find a fact, but they also know how to use the stars to find their way home. They are comfortable in a classroom, but they are most alive in the dirt. This is what we call the deep human child. This is the final part of our journey into the primal childhood. It is the story of the new awakening. It is a story about how we can bridge the massive gap between the Stone Age genius and the digital native to create a generation that is truly resilient, creative, and connected. We are going to look at the practical ways to bring the fire back into childhood and find out how we can raise children who are both high-tech and high-stakes. We are going to find the way to make the world a playground once again. To understand how to wake up the primal spirit in a modern child, we have to realize that the human brain has not changed. The children of today have the exact same hardware as the children who hunted mammoths 30,000 years ago. They have the same need for risk, the same hunger for belonging, and the same drive to master their environment. The problem isn't the child, it is the environment. We have built a world that is too smooth, and in doing so, we have accidentally turned off the very instincts that make children feel powerful and safe. The first step to the new awakening is to reintroduce intentional resistance. This means giving children things to do that are actually hard. In our modern world, we try to make everything easy for kids. We open their jars, we tie their shoes, and we solve their problems before they even have a chance to try. But as we learned in the first classroom, the brain only grows when it faces a challenge. We need to let our children struggle. We need to let them get frustrated with a knot that won't untie or a fort that keeps falling down. Every time a child solves a physical problem with their own hands, they are building primal confidence. They are telling their brain that they are capable of handling the world. We must move from being protectors who hide the world to being guides who prepare them for it. The second secret to the deep human child is reclaiming active play. We have seen how ancient play was actually survival training. Today, we can bring that same spirit back by choosing open-ended toys and experiences. A plastic toy that only does one thing is a passive toy. It does the thinking for the child. But a pile of sticks, a bag of clay, or a sandbox are active tools. They require the child to use their imagination and their physical strength. We should encourage our children to go off trail. We should let them climb the tree that looks a little bit too high. We should let them walk across the stream on a fallen log. These micro-adventures are the modern version of the wild playground. They teach the child how to manage fear and how to calculate risk. When a child stands on a high branch and feels that little flutter in their stomach, they are learning emotional regulation. They are learning that they can feel afraid and still be safe. This is the best medicine for the anxiety that many children feel today. By giving them small dangers to conquer, we are protecting them from the big fears of the future. We also have to look at the classroom of the home. In Chapter 2, we saw how ancient kids learned by watching and doing. We can bring this back by involving our children in the real work of the family. Instead of giving them fake chores like picking up toys, we should give them real responsibilities. Let them help cook the dinner over a real flame. Let them help fix the broken chair with real tools. Let them help plant the garden and decide which seeds go where. When a child does work that actually matters to the group, they feel the bond of the huddle. They realize that they are a link in the chain. This sense of purpose is what keeps a mind from drifting into boredom and sadness. We should turn our daily lives into a series of apprenticeships. We should stop saying, "Go, play in your room," and start saying, "Come watch how I do this." This, side by side. Learning is the most natural and powerful way for a human brain to soak up wisdom. It builds a bridge of respect between the generations that can never be built through a screen. Reclaiming the language of silence is the third pillar of the deep human child. We live in a world of constant noise, but deep thinking requires quiet. We must give our children the gift of boredom. When a child says, "I'm bored," we shouldn't reach for a tablet or turn on the TV. We should say, "Good." Silence is the space where creativity is born. In that quiet moment, the child's brain will eventually start to create its own stories. They will start to notice the way the light moves across the floor or the sound of the wind in the chimney. They will begin to talk to themselves and build their internal voice. This mental stamina is a superpower in the modern world. A child who can sit still and think is a child who can solve any problem. We can practice this by taking silent walks in nature or having a power down hour every night where the only light comes from a candle or a fire. We are teaching them that their own mind is the most interesting thing they own. We also have to fix the age bubble that we talked about in Chapter 4. To be a deep human, a child needs a multi-generational pack. They need to spend time with babies so they can learn to be gentle. They need to spend time with teenagers so they can see what is coming next. And most importantly, they need to spend time with elders. Grandparents and older neighbors are the keepers of the song lines. They have the stories and the patience that busy parents often lack. When a child sits at the feet of an elder and listens to a story about the past, they are receiving a map for the soul. They are learning that they belong to something much bigger than just themselves. We should look for ways to rebuild these modern tribes. We can have community dinners, neighborhood work days, or shared gardens. By breaking the age bubbles, we are creating a social safety net that protects the child from the digital mob. We are giving them a real-world pack that loves them for who they are, not for how they look on an app. The deep human child must also learn intentional technology. We don't want our children to be Luddites who are afraid of computers, but we want them to be the pilots of their machines. We should teach them that a tool is only good if it helps you do something real. Use the tablet to look up how to identify a bird you saw in the park. Use the phone to record a song you wrote, but then put the tool away. We must teach them the power of the off switch. We should show them that the digital world is just a thin layer on top of the real world. The most important data is not in the cloud. It is in the dirt, the air, and the eyes of the people around us. By making technology a specialized tool, Instead of a constant background, we are keeping the child's senses sharp. We are ensuring that they stay plugged in to reality, even when they are logged on to the internet. One of the most beautiful parts of the new awakening is the return to the body. A deep human child is physically intelligent. They know how their body works because they use it to interact with the world. We should encourage barefoot time and rough and tumble play. When children wrestle or run through a field of tall grass, they are learning spatial awareness and empathy. They learn exactly how much strength to use so they don't hurt their friend. They feel the texture of the earth and the resistance of the air. This physical literacy is the foundation of mental health. A child who is strong and capable in their body is much less likely to feel fragile in their mind. We should celebrate the victory of the scraped knee and the joy of the muddy shirt. These aren't messes to be cleaned. They are badges of honor from the wild playground. They are signs that the child is truly living. As we finish our journey through the primal childhood, I want you to look at the children in your life with new eyes. Don't just see a small person who needs to be entertained. See a young giant who is waiting to be tested. See a master learner who is wired for the first classroom. See a member of the tribe who is hungry for a rite of passage. You have the power to close the primal gap in your own home. You can start tonight by telling a story instead of watching a video. You can start tomorrow by letting them help you with a real task. You can start this weekend by taking them into the woods and letting them get lost in a game of stealth. You aren't just raising a kid, you are forging a survivor. You are the guardian of a fire that has been burning for 30,000 years. The journey of the human spirit is a circle. We started in the forest, moved into the city, and now we are finding our way back to the balance. The deep human child is the bridge to that future. They are the ones who will take our technology and our tools and use them with the wisdom of the ancestors. They will build a world that is high-tech, but also high-heart. They will be the masters of the machine and the guardians of the earth. We have lived through the great hunger, the night's edge, and the sleepwalking mind. Now, we are entering the era of the awakened child. The morning is here, and the world is waiting for a new generation of explorers to lead the way. As you drift off to sleep tonight, try to imagine that deep human child. See them sitting by a modern window, looking out at the stars. Feel the quiet strength in their heart and the sharp intelligence in their eyes. They aren't afraid of the future because they have remembered the past. They are safe, they are capable, and they are loved. You are part of that same brave family. You carry the resilience of the Huddle in your own bones. Your life is a song line that is still being written, and the best chapters are yet to come. The primal gap is closing, and the new beginning is starting inside you. Take a deep breath and feel the air fill your lungs. That air is the same air the mammoths breathed. Feel the weight of your body on the bed. That weight is the same gravity that held the first bone palaces to the earth. You are deeply connected to everything. You are a survivor, a teacher, and a deep human. The morning will bring a new chance to be wild and wise. Rest now in the quiet and the dark, and let your brain dream of the new playground. Let it plan for a tomorrow where the machine and the human live in perfect balance. The primal childhood is not a lost history. It is a promise for the future.